we're going to get started. I had this meeting a couple weeks ago, this webinar. So this is the year-end training session 2. It's not a continuation of the first one. It's the same one for people that couldn't make it a couple weeks ago. So for everyone that joined today, thanks for joining. It looks like we have 10 or 11 people. At the time I started a minute or two when I was muted, we had 9. So actually maybe works out best for everyone that has joined. So other people will join, I'm sure, as we go along. The first hour, we're going to go through accounts payable and 1099s. The last hour will be covering payrolls and W-2. So I know not all clients may have not have payroll. So if you're on this meeting just for 1099s and AP, totally understand if after the AP portion is done, you need or want to jump off because payroll doesn't apply to you, but just giving a heads up there. With as far as feedback from the end users, you all are muted. It's not an option that I have to turn off. It's something that GoToWebinar doesn't allow for. With that being said, there is questions and chat within the webinar. So I'll revert back to the questions and chat periodically to look to see if there's any questions that came up. So I'm going to jump over to our server where we have Sage. And first thing before jumping into Sage, just going over the agenda real quick. Here's my name, Jeremy Warner with ETHOSystems. I've been with formerly Cornerstone Solutions, but since 2005. So I've been doing this for quite some time here. As far as the agenda goes, we'll be discussing the year-end version 24.3 with the release notes. We won't go through every release notes, but I will point out a couple things that are in there. Then we'll be talking about Atrix, where you can make sure you have a username and login. You may be a new employee, I should say, in 2024. So whether you need to get with Atrix and get your own login, right? If you don't have access to the person that was before you, or possibly first time using Atrix. 2024 year-end deadlines. I have some of these here. I have documents that I'll pull up, and these documents will be sent over to you by Jen and Kirsten from our ETHOSystems marketing team, along with this recording. Then we'll, like I said, not in this order, but we'll be doing the 1099s and EW2s. And here, just going through the agenda real quick. Preparation and processing Atrix 1099s and Sage accounts payable. Downloading the Atrix forms. 1099 preparation report, which is not an Atrix report, it's a Sage 300 report. And then talking about vendor versus fiscal entity. Fiscal entity, if you heard the term prefix over in General Ledger, you can run your Atrix 1099s per prefix if you have prefixes set up in General Ledger. Then talking about recalculate 1099 totals. This is one I mention every year. Not all clients are aware of it. I highly recommend recalculating 1099 totals. I'll show you within accounts payable where that's done and why we want to do that. When I say why we want to do that, because in respect to the current year, your accounts payable is showing. I never mentioned client names, but literally yesterday I was on a meeting with a client, and their year was back in 2022 for accounts payable. So what we did is rolled forward to 2025 and then ran the recalculate 1099 totals, and the vendor that we were looking at was the number that he was hoping for. So we'll walk through that over in accounts payable. This is just a screenshot of referring to what I'm talking about here, especially when you start making payments into beyond the next year. So with their year, that example that I literally worked on yesterday and have worked on similar scenarios in the past, their accounts payable year was 2022, and then they were, cutting checks in 2024, 2020, and then now in 2025. So Sage will give you, it's kind of hard to see this, but it talks about the payment date entered is more than 1 year in the future. So we'll look at the master file totals and why we need to recalculate 1099s for that. And even if you are in the current year, and maybe you're a new employee came on board in 2024, you don't know necessarily what happened on January of 24. So were they behind at that time? So again, you can still recalculate the 1099 totals, even if you're showing in the current year, just to be safe. And what that recalculate 1099 totals does is it literally goes through all of the transactions and looks at the payment dates being check dates or electronic payment dates, and then it updates the totals that Atrix will use for processing 1099s. All right, and then after we do the accounts payable, preparation and processing Atrix W-2s in Sage 300. All right, with that being said, let's come back up here. As far as the 24.3 release notes, the version that we're on is the latest version of Sage 24.3. Get the question every year, which I haven't looked back at the questions in the webinar, but maybe someone already asked this, do you have to be on 24.3? As far as a Sage 300 consultant, right, it's my job, my duty to, say, hey, highly recommend, right, to be on the latest version, because if we start to get in the habit of, oh, let's miss this update, now we're 2 or 3 versions behind, and now we're really trying to catch our tail, if you will, and getting up to snuff with tax downloads and updates. So if anything were to come up in the processing that doesn't work properly, we call Sage, right? And Sage says, hey, you're not on the the latest version, so hey, let's do a fire drill to get you on 24.3. So again, recommend be on 24.3, the latest version. Now I will say I worked with clients in the past couple of weeks that weren't on 24.3. They entered their payroll in 25. Before doing so, downloaded taxes and payroll, what have you, and we're able to process W-2s and 1099s. So it does work, but we don't want to cross our fingers, if you will, right? So 24.3 is the latest version. If you don't have the release notes or have access to the release notes, like I said, all of these documents that I have sitting here and putting together, I put this together for the 12/19 date. But one thing I want to highlight in here, going back to or staying on the accounts payable side of things, I won't go through however many pages there are, but right here, close this. So even in this release notes 24, this is not specific to 24.3. As you can see, if you're on maybe version 20.5 of Sage, right? There are versions 24.1, 24.2, 24.3. So it does point out the different anything resolved or fixed in the respective versions. But this guy is here. What I want to show you here, it did go to a split screen. But over here to the right, in version 24.1, right? Again, if you're currently on version 20 or prior to 24.1, when you go to 24.3, obviously 24.1 will be included, but there is now, as of 24.1, on the setup of the vendor, we have this alternate 1099 address. I haven't seen anyone take advantage of that to this point. Maybe someone on this call has been wanting or needing or requesting that as far as an enhancement request. But so if I come back over here to accounts payable and go into setup vendor, we're going to be using this Joe Schmo that I set up. If I go down here to 1099, over here to 1099 settings, and where's it at here? Oops, sorry. Let me check that box. You have to check this box right here, alternate address for 1099, and then this button down here pops up. So point is, then if you type an address here, it will supersede the main address that's over here. Possibly for an alternate address, right? If this address is the physical location of your office, but as far as the 1099, right? If there's a, the accounting firm, right, handling your 1099s, what have you, and you want to utilize that alternate address for that, that is an option if that applies to you. So while we're in this screen, looking at this here, we have, I'm going to actually pop back over to webinar, see if there's any questions here yet. I don't see any. Okay, we'll keep going. Here on the setup of the vendor, we're going to start talking about the recalculating of 1099s, because the first thing we want to do, I'm actually going to close this and then we'll come back in here. The first, before processing W-2s, first thing we'd want to do is check the version, right? See if you need and want to get to 24.3. Then when we're in accounts payable, you want to come to File, Company Settings, AP Settings. And within AP Settings, I would think everyone on this call has seen this screen. If not, showing you the first time, there are 2 year endings for your accounts payable, the year ending date and the 1099 year ending date. Yesterday, the client was both in 22 and 22 for their data, right? The reason why we're looking at 22 and 2023 is because this is sample data, and that's the year Sage has sample data as of. So we will be using 2022 data simply for the fact of sample data. But in your world, we don't want this to be back, a year, 2, 3 years ago, right? I've had plenty of clients that you look at the year ending date and it's the current year, we'll call it 2025 because that's the current year now, but their year ending date is back in 2020 or 21 or 22 because they simply came here and did the close year, but didn't do the 1099 year. So that would be the first thing I would recommend going to check where that year ending date is. And then from there, we want to come over here and close year and close 1099 year. They are 2 separate tasks, as you see here. I'm not going to close this year because of where the data is at. If I get too far in the future, right, then there's no data and I can't run 1099s, because Atrix allows you to run 1099s for the current year and the prior year. There is not an option to say, hey, let's go run 1099s for 2 years ago or next year. It's either this year or last year. If you do click start, when you do, it's going to pop up a message, hey, have you backed up your AP master file? If you say, even if you didn't, and you click yes, you can proceed. But just pointing out, I would never say don't back up, right? We recommend doing backups, but an idea there is if your 1099 year was 2025 and then you did it one more time on accident because you had to catch up, well, if you get into 2026 but you still need to print 2024, then you're saying, oh wait, how do I undo that? Well, then we're calling Sage and they're saying, hey, did you get where's the backup? Let's back up and let's go restore the data. Oh, I didn't take a backup. So don't want to get caught in that mess there. So with that being said, let's come back here, back to the idea of setup vendors and the recalculate 1099 totals, right? Right now, again, the current year for 1099s is 2023, right? I put an amount in there reflecting the year, and then the next year is 2024. So the reason why I point that out is if I went to go enter a manual check or a quick check or cut checks with a 2025 date, there is no 2 years from now, right? So it's not like it's going to store it in this blank field over here that I'm circling 2 years from now. It's literally going to update next year with that amount. So let's say I went to go do a $100 check right now. Next year is going to show 2,124, $100 more than the 2024, right? And then if you try to run your 1099s for 2024, it would return 2124 when in reality that check was 2025. So you may say, well, how do we fix that? Well, that's where the once you get the years to the current year, come over here. You will need everyone out of accounts payable. People don't need to be out of general, users don't have to be out of general ledger or payroll or project management or anything, but you will need to get your users, all of your AP users out, because this does update the master file totals. And when you do click on this, it would let us know that the master file is in use. That actually happened yesterday. We had to get the users out. But right here, all we're doing is clicking start. It does ask for a printout journal, so you can just call. I already did this 2 weeks ago in the class, so I'm just going to overwrite this one, recalculate 1099 totals, and click save. I'll overwrite that file. And what this is saying is it's going to go through and zero out all the vendor totals and prefix totals for the given years, and will repopulate them based off of transactions. So in our scenario, back over here to set up vendors, after doing that recalculate, what it would have done is put in 21-24 into this year, right? And move the buckets or the totals around. So I'm going to peek here to see if there's any questions on that or if that made sense. The short of it is, hey, get your year into the current year, recalculate totals so that you can trust the numbers in Atrix. All right, don't see any questions in chat or questions to this point, which is good. All right, so now here on this vendor setup screen, we want to make sure we have the, recipient's tax ID number, in also with the vendor receives a form 1099. The limit again for 2024 for 1099s is 600. But with that being said, this Joe Schmo, if you set up this vendor throughout the year, right, and then maybe Joe Schmo was a new vendor, hey, you needed to set him up quickly so that you could cut a check to him. Well, you could set up the vendor and then not check this box, right? Because you may say, oh, we'll wait till the end of the year till we can start getting our W-9s from vendors and going through that. Point is, just because this year is over 600, I have had this question asked by clients, Sage does not automatically check this box for you. You have to come through, and what you want to do is come over here and reports under miscellaneous. This is the 1099 preparation report. Is this required to run before running Atrix? No, but I highly recommend, after you get the year up to snuff, recalculate totals, come over here to 1099 preparation in AP under miscellaneous 1099 preparation. We'll click that. Here it's asking, hey, are you doing this by vendor or by fiscal entity? So if I come back over here, back to the prefix talk, I'm going to go over here to general ledger. And in sample data, but also looking on your environment, if you go to setup prefix base, you'll see what fiscal entities or prefixes you have set up. If you don't have prefix base here, company and base account, right, and you just have your chart of accounts, meaning your company data folder, then over here on your AP 1099 prep report, we simply just need to go by vendor because you have the one company, meaning the one company data folder. But if you are utilizing prefixes at your in your environment, right, this is essentially prefix A. So if I go into company, Within Timberline Construction data folder, we have a company called Timberline Construction, which is prefix 10, all right? Prefix 21, General Construction, and we have four companies here that you could code AP invoices against, right? So if you have prefixes set up and have multiple companies or entities, we'll want to run this preparation report by fiscal entity. Here, if I come up, let's go to by vendor here, and we'll run it twice. Whether you select vendor or fiscal entity, again, here, what's the 1099 year, current year? So again, hey, if you did get into 2025, right, which I would recommend because you're not, when you're closing the 1099 year, I just explained this to the client yesterday, and I've mentioned it many of times to clients. Think of the AP close year as rolling balances forward because it's truly not locking down AP. General ledger is the ruler there, if you will, right? Of hey, so that client that I worked with yesterday, their GL, which maybe plenty of you on the call, their general ledger is still in 2024, December of 24, but we did close AP 2024 and got into 2025, and I explained to him, hey, after today's call, if you get a delayed invoice or a delayed invoice and someone, your controller wants to accrue that invoice into 2024 because you just had a delay in entering that invoice, just because we closed AP 2024, you can still go enter that invoice and record the payment in 2024 because general ledger is going to be the one who decides if you can post a 2024. So with that being said, here, if I go to current year, that's what we're going to do here. We want to do the minimum reporting amount of 600 because that's the number that we're going to type in when we go over here to Atrix. Here, the default is, hey, show me everyone that's marked as received 1099. Well, what I would always recommend is run this report as all, whether they're checked or not. And the reason for that is then if you do find the year that you're in, or again, if you're in 2025, you would jump to last year, which would be 2024, minimum 600 and all. And the reason for this is because, and this report for this year, I'm actually going to go to last year because I know last year in the sample data has more vendors with payment history. So here, as you can see, the receives 1099 checkbox, right, shows as yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, right? So the idea there is that you can be like, well, wait a second, AAA insurance and bonding, they got paid $16,000. They should be checked. Well, chances are when someone set up that vendor, they just didn't do the W-9 research right at that time. So what you'd want to do is look at a report like that and say, hey, yeah, they absolutely do need a 1099. Come over here, vendor receives form 1099, click save, close, right? It doesn't automatically update, refresh on the screen. But now if here you go. So now just rerun the report and there's your yes. Or you may go through here and see a yes where you're like, wait, no, they shouldn't, right? Same idea, just uncheck the box. And then as you're scrolling through here, looking for the recipient tax ID, right? If there's anyone that's marked as yes, but no recipient tax ID, we'll certainly want to make sure we populate that. I'm going to go peek and see if there's any questions. I'm not begging for questions. I just want to make sure if I'm missing any or if I see any here. All right, I'll keep going. All right, so once this prep report is set, right, as you look at all the no's or yeses, then after you run that, then you can absolutely say, hey, let me switch it to receives 1099 because I did my quality assurance, if you will, right, under the all. But now let me go print this to paper We're not going to print it to paper on this meeting. I'm going to do a print preview, and now you can completely see your totals here with that check bar marked as just only the ones that receive a 1099. That's the one by vendor. If you rerun this report, if you do have prefixes set up, we'll go to miscellaneous and 1099 prep. And if I come over here to by fiscal entity, again, I'm going to go to last year because there's more data in here. I'm going to put in 600, same thing, right? Initially change it to all, print preview, and what you'll notice on this report, you see this prefix A, company 10. So it'll sort and group and total by that respective prefix, because once we go over to Atrix and generate 1099s, we'll have to go through Atrix generating 1099s per GL prefix. So in this sample date, we'd have to run through it 4 times, right? Or depending on the number of companies or entities you have, you'd have to run through Atrix the number of times you have prefixes set up. But as you can see here, now here's 13,000 for company 10. Then we jump over here to company 21. Actually, I'm going to click close in the mindset that we already did our quality assurance. I'm going to go to receives 1099. And then this is your true numbers, right? That you have marked as yes and yes. So now this is actually 3,500 for company 10. There's 3 pages. So even though there are 4 companies set up in the sample data, checks for the year 2022 at least were only done for 2 companies. That's why we don't see the 3rd and 4th company. But if there was, they absolutely would show up on this report. And then here gives you the report total on the last page. The way Sage allows for that, here, if I come over to company settings, AP settings, if you do utilize prefixes, you want to make sure that this checkbox is checked. I haven't seen where it's not checked, but I do know, installing the software, it's not checked by default. So if you do utilize prefixes, or maybe you don't utilize prefixes now, or if you do, you only have one company. But if you have since added more than one company to a prefix, meaning it added a company in 2024, you would want to make sure this is checked. If it's not, you would want to check it. And then that would be a scenario where you'd want to come back in here and recalculate 1099 totals, because then it's going to update the respective prefix totals so that you can generate 1099s for those companies. So I haven't come across that scenario, right? I just kind of thought of it as I was talking here of where this was unchecked, but that is a logical scenario that could come up for any clients. With that, recalculate 1099s would cover our bases there. I'm going to jump back over here to our agenda, because I did start getting into 1099s, which that was, like I said, I'm going to be covering the first hour. But before we actually go do Atrix, I need to get up here to the these links here for Atrix. So I'm going to click this link, make sure. There, oops, open it up twice there. So let's close this. So here's Atrix's website. Before going into 1099s or W-2s for that matter, I would come over here to Atrix and literally click log in, right? And test out your username and password, because once you start processing the 1099s, go through at the very end, it says, hey, log in, so you can, put your credit card information in if you're going to be having Atrix, send out the 1099s and W-2s. So rather than test your login at that point, I would recommend, because I had one client in particular that they said, oh, I don't have a username and login. Well, then we had to call Atrix. Atrix does a secure method of sending the person the contact on file, right, with give them the FEIN number, and then they had to reset their username and password. It took a couple days to get that all ironed out when they thought they were going to be printing the 1099s that day. So again, just I know it's January 9th now, but even this would be a good preparation step if you're like planning on doing 1099s next week, right? You can do stuff like this to make sure you have your login and password. And also, I don't have a login and password. I don't have an FEIN number, but if I did, you can also access through the Atrix. You can track your what are called AFID numbers, Atrix filing identification number, and within there you can see your history and look at the status to see if it's pending, rejected, completed, right, successfully, what have you. With all that being said, taking a step back, if you don't have a login or password, right, now we're coming up here over here to this enroll, or you could have clicked enroll up here. And then this is where you're creating your company's username and password, picking the accounting package, which is Sage 300 CRE, putting your contact information, everything here as the EIN number, and then that process will authenticate through Atrix and get that going so that when you do file 1099s, we can use that username and password. I don't want to assume everyone on this call has a login for Atrix, so that's why I always would like to point this out to make sure you're good to go there. All right, let me close this here. And like I said, that you can, if you jot that path down, efile.atrix.com, or like I said, we'll send this Word document. Here's 2024 year-end deadlines, little help center I found here. Trying to click the, keep opening it twice here with the control click. But this is, as you can see here, directly from Atrix's website via the link. It does go by, state, right? Depending what state you're in, and gives you the W-2 and 1099 deadlines that you have. All right, close this. Oops, Word. And a few weeks ago, a different client, you're definitely not required to email W-2s or 1099s, but it is an option within Sage and Atrix. So like, just like what I'll point out over on the employee W-2 side, if I click list over here, 1099s, here for the email, yes, you do have, under the general, you have contact 1 and contact 2 email. Atrix does not look at these email addresses, right? You may be, if you have the product My Assistant, right, you may have My Assistant utilizing those contact 1 and contact 2, right, for notifications. My Assistant being the add-on product for Sage for notifications. Point is, if I come over here to 1099, this is the email you'd want to populate if you decide to electronically file, or when I say file, electronically email your vendors, the 1099s. So you'll want to populate this here. And then once you do go through the Atrix option and do that, then it's going to retrieve the email addresses from this spot here. If you have 100 or 200 or 300 emails already on that contact 1, but then you want to start doing electronic 1099, what I would recommend is either talk with your consultant, or if you have someone in-house, utilize something like Microsoft Access, where you could copy all the email addresses from the contact 1 or contact 2 and then paste them, meaning ODBC write them to this field rather than manually type 200, 300 email addresses over here. So there is a way we could do that, and I would be using Microsoft Access if that's something you decided. Or Hey, if you have 20 or 30 vendors, right, that have 1099s and you want to email them, you put it here. Through the Atrix email, it doesn't send them a PDF. What it does, it sends them a link, a secured link. So on the recipient's end, they would click the link and it would give them a unique username and password to access and download their 1099. All right, with that being said, let's cancel, close, come back over here to the Word. I'll click on this link. But again, Atrix is really great help topics, right? As far as how to set that up. Again, if you don't utilize the email side and this doesn't apply to you, and you want Atrix or yourself to send them out or print them out, again, email is not required, even though you would be e-filing the, the 1096 and the, W3s and things of that nature. But there is a help topic here, is that it doesn't come from Atrix email, but it does give you a look and feel of how this is set up, right? Those would be the email addresses that would pull in from Sage, right? And the password that the recipient you would receive. So it's auto-generated passwords. You don't set the password. Atrix does that. So everyone would have their unique username being the email address and password. And then down here, like I said, this link is available to you, but you would have to set up letting Atrix know, hey, what email settings are we using, right? Email settings being your company's email address, typically. Well, a lot of people use Office 365, right? And setting up that SMTP server, office365.com, or smtp.office365.com. This is something where your consultant could help, but we would need the client being your IT department to help with this, right? I'm sure any IT that saw this and help topic, they would understand, all these questions being asked here. And then once you do that, you can have a test email. All right, with all that being said, let's go into Atrix. Hopefully all that was beneficial, or at least something that was with everything we just talked about. Once you have your login, right, we've done the years, we've recalculated. On the menu, I've had clients ask, well, where's Atrix? I don't see, you keep referencing Atrix. Where's Atrix on the task menu? It's under task, government e-filing reporting, and form 1099. We don't see the word Atrix here, but the Atrix software is embedded within Sage, and that's the Atrix tool. It's not a Sage product, but built into Sage, because Atrix goes across multiple platforms meaning software packages. So here, form 1099, let me go peek and see if there's any questions. Don't see any yet. All right, perfect. I'll jump back over here. This screen right here, right, it went right into, hey, are we doing a new report or a saved report? If I jump over here to our help talk folder I put together, this Word document, couple things here. Number one, I will talk about that error. Where's that here? I think it's actually on the other document. Sorry, bear with me. This one. This is what, when I say typically would see, if you haven't been into Atrix or jumped into 1099s for, a few weeks or a month, or maybe since, well, obviously since last year for the 1099s, depending if you have payroll, you'll get a message that says, hey, do we want an automatic update? Yes, we want to click automatic update. So this screen will pop up. And the reason why I say that is we didn't see that message here because 2 weeks ago, I had already updated the forms. So my point is, don't be surprised when you go into your side of things that it says, hey, click automatic update, and then you start seeing these windows here. I have had a client say, well, we don't work in Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, what have you. Why is it downloading those forms? I only work in Illinois and Wisconsin. Well, when the person asked me that a dozen years ago, to be honest, I was like, good question. Why would it, right? I literally called Atrix, talked to someone that their help topics, or I'm sorry, their support have always been great. I've always had great experience with them, knock on wood, right? But point is, I remember her distinctly saying, well, Atrix is 100% liable. When I say liable, they guarantee that they're pulling down all the latest forms from the IRS. So point is if Atrix starts trying to look into your data and say, oh, did they work here? Did they work here? Okay, let's only bring those forms down. Boom, their 100% guarantee pretty much goes out the window, right? So they don't want to play the guessing game or try to research in Sage or ask you what forms you want to download. It's going to download all of them. So I know it's kind of a small point, right? But I have had someone ask that question, and I explained that to them. They're like, okay, whatever, right? I was like, well, you asked, right? So that was the answer. But she's been happy with the Atrix since. So here, just some screenshots of a typical updating files, and then here, you would see update complete, and then once you click close, it goes away. So all you'd have to do is come back in here after you did the update, come through here, form 1099, and then it would go right into here like we are. Before I click new 1099 here, I'm going to jump over to this error that I talked about, or put the screenshots together, because even since 2 weeks ago when I did this year-end class, other ETHOSystems consultants have pointed out this error. Other clients, I've done, I think, 3 upgrades to 24.3 within the past 2 weeks, and anytime they go into Atrix, they get this message here. You may not get the message if you're like on 24.1 or 20.5, what have you, but we have been experiencing this in 24.3. We haven't got a reason or explanation from Atrix or Sage, to be honest. But with that being said, do have the fix. So don't be scared if you get to 24.3, go into 1099 and get that error. We have a fix for you. And that fix is literally from that given workstation, going to the C drive, program files x86, Atrix software, Atrix forms. You see that path right here, and this error report. Another gal I talked with to at Atrix a few weeks ago, as long as I've been doing Atrix, I've always seen this error report here. I've never clicked on it because, as the word says, report, I assumed it was some, right? When I say some, error report. Well, she said it's actually a fix tool, right? It literally goes out and makes sure that it goes and grabs the most recent. It essentially does a manual update and gets Atrix. It's a fix tool for Atrix. So literally running that fix tool, and I'll scroll down. I took some snippets of this. It just runs through the fix tool, installs it, right? Kind of straightforward information right there. Click complete, ready to install, click install. You go back into Atrix, that error is gone. So this may not apply to you, but give me a heads up if it does. This is a quick fix. All right, so let me come back over here to Form 1099, click New 1099 Report. We click Next. The saved report is you can go look at prior year 1099s if you do saved reports. So as we do the new report and save it, it automatically saves it, so you could retrieve retrieve prior ones. Another reason why you'd want to go into saved 1099 report is once you do populate or finalize and generate and process the 2024, and whether you utilize the email option or in the mail, it got lost in the mail or got didn't get to the recipient, and they say, hey, I didn't get my 1099, and you say, yep, well, we sent it. Well, here, let me go print you a new one. That's when you can go back into save 1099 report, and then there's the reprint options. And actually, I'm just going to show you that real quick for the saved options here. If I go to open, so here's the 2022 one. If I come over here to edit, so you can come and retrieve the prior years and do any reprints that you need to there. All right, let me click no. Let's come back in here and get this 1099 so that we can move on to payroll here. So form 1099, new report. Just like I said on the 1099 preparation report, right? Here's by vendor or by fiscal entity. If you do by fiscal entity, like I said, you pick one at a time. We're not doing two at a time. So you do have to do as many companies, as many pass-throughs as there are companies. Notice again, 10 and 21, Atrix already knew that 10 and 21 were the only companies or GL prefixes that had 1099 payments to it, so it doesn't show, the other ones there. I'm going to just do GL. Actually, I'm going to switch this and do to vendor, because then we'll see more vendors on our list, but the same idea, same screens. It's just saying, hey, where are we retrieving the data from? Here you have the form. It defaults to the non-employee compensation, right? But you do have these other options, right, for the form types. I think everyone has, I keep coming here, I just want to point that out. So if I go to set up vendor, if a vendor needs to be a different type, right, we want to mark it accordingly here. I'm actually going to switch this Joe Schmo to 1099 NEC, click save, close. Now if I come back over here to e-file and reporting, new report, to vendor, right, NEC, I am going to do the reporting year back to 2022. I'm going to move back a year because like I said, there's more data in 22 for the data. And like I said earlier on the call, you can run 1099s for the current year your Sage 300 is in, or the prior year. So even if you have got into 2025, right, with the Sage data, you can roll back to 2024 and print your 1099s. But I do know, clients are hesitant to go into that next year. When I say next year, into the current year, because they see the word close and they're thinking, hey, if we're closing it, we're done. We can't do anything in there. No, general ledger is the deciding factor there. So, and I would recommend, getting into 2025, because again, you can roll back a year, because once you start looking at inquiries for YTD, year-to-date purchases or this year, right? I would want to, if I was a user, I would want to look at an inquiry, and if it said this year in my mind is 2025, not Sage's year. So with all that being said, there's a 600. We're going back a year. In your scenario, like I said, it could be going back to 2024, which is why you're on this call. I'm going to make up a federal ID number here, 1, 2, 3, right, all the way to 7. Let me do this here. Actually, do that next. Here's all the vendors, right, that have payments in 2022. We would want to select all these. I wouldn't recommend. I have actually had some clients be like, oh wait, they shouldn't receive a 1099. They shouldn't receive a 1099. You could do that. I don't recommend that, right? It's not going to hurt anything. I wouldn't maintain your 1099 totals here. I would maintain it by running the 1099 prep report, going into setup vendor and either checking that box or not checking that box. And then these two guys wouldn't pull in here. So the idea is when you get to this screen, Atrix is being nice to be a little flexible by doing that. I would recommend, like I said, having Atrix pull in the vendors that we told Sage that we want 1099s on. Because I have had clients to be like, hey, why would I ever want to deselect something? And my answer is Atrix allows that flexibility, but we don't want to get in the habit of maintaining the who gets the 1099 through Atrix. We want to have it in our source data being Sage, right? All right, I'm going to click next. Oops. And then here it just gives you the saying, hey, we're going to go through and generate. Now Atrix is saying, hey, let me go out to your Sage data. Let me pull that data in. While that's happening, I'm going to jump over here to see if there's any questions. Here we go. Someone has a question. Oh, perfect. Good question. Can you do a test run of 1099 in Atrix? That's awesome timing. Is it Madeline? Did I see that? Madeline. Yep. My oldest niece's name is Madeline. All right. So back here. Why did that open? I click close because I tried to open up. I thought I did new report, right? New report. Third time's a charm, right? Vendor. Let's go to 2022. 3.6. So Madeline's question was, can I do a test run? And the answer is yes, and we'll see that here shortly. Atrix is very interactive, which is good, right? So it's just saying, hey, you're going to look at 22 data, the year 22 data, but the form is 24. You want to continue. If it's your data, we don't want to click continue. We got to figure out why either you didn't get the latest form, right, which it should have actually downloaded, right? Or hey, you picked the right year. I'm announcing that I'm breaking my recommendation simply because sample data has data in 2022 and we don't have any sample data in 2024 other than that one Joe Schmo check that I did. So here I'm going to say continue, but the takeaway here is that Atrix is interactive and is paying attention to what we're clicking on here. So you shouldn't receive that message. Back to Madeline's question here is, hey, do we want to do a test drive? There is a nice feature that you could do your first 25, if you have 150 or 200 employees. If you're going to do a test drive, I would recommend doing the full employees, because as soon as you get to that 26 employee, right, maybe the first 25 look good, but hey, that 26th or 27th or 28th, right, hey, something's off, right? Point is, test drive all of your recipients. I don't see any reason why you'd want to just do the first 25, but if you want, it is an option for you. I would do the test drive there. And going through that, Madeline and anyone this applies to, even when you get to the very end, it does say, hey, we're not going to process or e-file anything, hence the term test drive, but it does pop up a login and say, hey, here, let's log in to confirm your login is successful. Earlier on this webinar, if you remember, or if you were on at that time, Atrix, I pointed out the Atrix website and I mentioned, hey, test out your login over on Atrix, right, as a preparation step. But if you don't do it there, you do have that option at the end of the test drive here. So other than it not processing, right, and actually going through processing, all the windows are the same. So good call on asking about the test drive. Here, it's going to pull in the tax ID number that we already typed in. As far as the see how it says multiple payroll data files, we're definitely in AP. On the payroll side of things, right, which we're going to be getting in there shortly and wrap up this 1099 AP side of things. Payroll, you may have a salary data folder, right, and separated from your field employees, and I'll talk about that in more detail when we get over to payroll here. But as far as AP, I don't know of anyone that has separate data folders for AP, right? If you do, let me know. We can talk through that after the call if need be. But this step right here is typical. When I say typical, more prevalent in the payroll world as opposed to the AP world. So here you would just say, no, I use a single data file for this company. Again, I'm not aware of anyone that uses multiple AP files. But what Atrix allows you to do is, if you do have separate AP files, which I find it hard to believe if you did, but let me know if anyone does. Definitely on the payroll side, what it does is you can generate and bring files together. When I say bring files together, like the payroll situation where you have a salary data folder and then in the main data folder you have the field. You may ask, well, why would I want to do that? Well, from a security aspect, if you have a payroll person that just handles the field employees, but you don't want him or her to look at the salary employees, right? You could do that from a security aspect and have a payroll manager or controller handle the salary side. But then Atrix will allow you to bring those files together for one W-2 processing. Here we have the company name, filling in the contact information. This information is since we did it by vendor, it pulls from file company settings general here, right? That information that we have there pulls into here because we did it by vendor. If you do it by entity, it doesn't pull it by the file company settings general. It pulls it from setup prefix base company, pulls the address information from here. Just a little heads up there. So I have had clients say, hey, every year I have to, or last year, the last couple of years, I've had to type this information in. It's because they picked prefix and they just didn't have their the address information in here by company. So once we did that, populated that information there, then if you did do by fiscal entity, it would populate here. All right, let me click next. Like I said, Atrix is very interactive. It says, hey, invalid, right? Those periods or dashes, right? So I'm going to take this out there, PO box, make Atrix happy. And here's another one. I always put my middle initial, right? I didn't even do that on purpose with that period, but it does say, hey, we don't like those periods there for this filing. Which type of file, right? Filing for your company employer. Let's click next. If there's any respective tax item, again, more prevalent on the payroll side of things for local taxes, your SUTA, right, or unemployment or withholding. Click next, and here's that option. Do you have any recipients who elected to only receive 1099s? I'm going to say no, but if you were to click yes, then on a subsequent window, just like I showed you in that help topic, it pulls in the email addresses, right, or the employees that you do want to receive electronically meaning email, and then they would get a link. Well, when I said employees, we're talking 1099, but the vendors would receive a link with a password. They would log in, and they could download or print their PDF. I'm going to click next. Here, I always recommend, it's not required to truncate. I typically recommend just doing the X's, but I mean, whether you use asterisks or X's, that's a personal preference. I typically do the X's, but that's not right or wrong. Here, if I click next, all right, so it's just stepping us through here up in this blue shaded area. It's saying, hey, what are we doing first? We're verifying the recipient tax ID numbers here. You can maximize this screen, which, as we know in Sage, you don't always have that luxury, right? Here you have a vertical bar that we can move over just to see everything better. You can move it over further, and then you have a scroll bar down here. But point is, it shows what step we're on. We're verifying the recipient tax ID number. So here, if you recall earlier when I said, hey, AAA insurance should have received a 1099, so I checked that box, but then I didn't populate the tax ID number. So right here, if I click next, Atrix is going to say, hold on, you can't tell me that they receive it without giving me a tax ID number, right? So I am going to, rather than close out of Atrix and go back through here, I would recommend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? At this point, especially on the test run, right? Then you could go back and set. But if you did everything I've recommended to this point, other than doing what I did and check someone without typing in a recipient tax ID number, it just caught me there, right? Atrix said, hey, you need something there. My point is, this does not write back to Sage. So if after we did this and we went into set up vendor and we look, this data is not here. It's just populated on the Atrix. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend what I'm doing here, but for the sake of the webinar, I want to type that in and move forward so we can get over to payroll. But the point there is it does not write the data back to Sage. We want Sage to be essentially the keeper of the record, right, to pull it into Atrix. But here I'm going to click next. And now we're here verifying recipient's name. I do know on version 24.3, or if it came out in 24.2 or 24.1, when it's not an employee but a person, right, as a 1099 and doing business ads, there was a fix in there for how it displays the name properly. But here we're just doing all vendors, doing next, verifying the previous step. You can go back to previous, right? I just click through there, right? Here's all the information. Next, verifying all income boxes, right? Now, notice it jumped over here to the right. Come back over here. And then even I've had clients literally say, hey, I know the numbers it should be. These are the numbers, are not correct from Sage. Well, you may say, well, why aren't they correct? Well, again, going back to one of my big points was they didn't have the year properly set. They didn't do the recalculate 1099 totals, right? So we don't want to get in a habit of, oh, let me just type in the number that I know it should be. We want to get these numbers correct from Sage, and the way to do that is making sure the year is set properly and recalculate 1099 totals. So here I'm going to click next. Next, and then we're going to wrap this up here in the next few minutes to get into the W-2 side of things. This is your final opportunity to review, essentially saying, hey, everything we did there is correct. So, because when I say Atrix is 100% liable, well, when I say liable, 100% guarantee, their 100% guarantee is that the information that you put in this grid, right? Atrix is confirming that you've reviewed that information, but Atrix is confirming that they have the latest and greatest forms, required forms, I should say. Here, the complete 1099 e-filing service, I always say ETHOSystems or myself, Jeremy, we don't get a penny for for the clients that do the complete 1099 service, but more and more clients that I've been working with, I've heard, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, right? They've said it, right? Uh, Initially, it wasn't a no-brainer for them. They say, oh, you know what? I want to go to other options. I want to print this, print, right? I was on, never named client names, but literally when we did the 1099s and W-2s, they said, oh, I forgot to order the forms. In the past, always printed them. So I said, no worry, just this time you have to do the complete 1099 service, right? And when she started doing the numbers, she's like, oh, that just saved me, these forms are a couple $100, right? So this year we did the 1099 and the W-2s for the complete, put the credit card information in, and Atrix sends the, W-2s, or in this case, the 1099s, with your return address information on there. So again, not forcing you or telling you you have to click the complete. More and more clients are, so I would highly recommend it, or at least consider it, but totally get it that, hey, there's people out there that want to physically hand it off, right? So they know in their head, right, that it did get delivered to the vendor or the employee. I would never argue with that. Hey, to each their own on that. But if you did do something like that, you have to come down, down here, right? You're printing them. There's no charge to print the recipient copies, but there is for the, the e-filing here. And even in this scenario, look at this, the minimum down here is $27.99. Up here, the minimum is $27.99 for the 8 recipients. So why not just have, rather than paying for stamp postage, which is what, 70 cents or so now. I don't remember the last time I bought a stamp, but I know they're 71 cents or whatever it is. But here, if we click next, this PDF archive, I would say no. Could you? Yes, but you could. When I say no, you can still access your prior years by going into saved reports. All right, I'm gonna click next. Here's next, and then I always recommend printing this. If you have a filing cabinet and you want to store what you had, think of this as literally a cover page, right, of what you did for this year. So you print that, have that at the top of your stack. And even though we did the complete service, like I said, Atrix would be sending the 1099s for you. Here, the first step, as it says, report 1 of 5. Here's your payer meaning you. Here's your copy, right? So if I do a print file, it does say insert the 4-part perforated paper now. I mean, if you're having Atrix send these out, right, and you're just doing this for your records, right, in my mind, there's no sense of purchasing 4-part perforated if you're doing the complete service for 1099s, right, or Atrix. But here, select your printer, click print, and then you have your payer copy. It shows you the number of pages, right? 2 pages since there's 8. If there was 9, we'd certainly have the 3rd page, but only have the, the first one populated. So I'm going to click next. While I click next, let me peek here to see if there's any other questions. I promise we'll get into the payroll. I think those are the one question. Thank you again, Madeline, for that question. Here's federal 1099, right? The 3 up, right? So we have three pages. So that 3rd page, right, would have 2, right? Because it's a 3 up. And the 3rd one is just your information, but not the vendor here. But again, print copy, click OK, prints that copy for your records, click next. And then up top here's your federal 1096, showing the 8, right, the NEC, print copy, click OK, prints it for your records. Click next. This sample data, since Sage is based out of Beaverton, Oregon, that's why the sample data has Oregon, but it would show your respective states state copy. Print copy, click OK, and click next. And then this is the respective state form. Before it was the state copy, right? But Atrix, if you do the complete, Atrix will file with your respective state, so you don't have to print these off and go manually file with your states, especially if you work in multiple states. It's slick that Atrix can communicate with them and electronically file for you. But again, print copy for your records here. Oops. Next step. I'll click next, and now this is where that login that I mentioned earlier. Retrieve the list of errors. Have detected. Close the session. Huh. Well, we are going to move on it. To be honest, I've been doing this since Atrix. Well, Sage 300 consultant since 05. Consultant since, or I'm sorry, Atrix since what, 2010 maybe. I haven't seen this. I did click next, and I don't know if I clicked cancel. I don't think I clicked cancel. I literally just 2 weeks ago did this. So if that comes up to you, it's kind of crazy right at the very end, right? Something like this popped up. A problem has been detected with this file. Close the session, restart the file, and update if required, and continue your work in progress. Do you want to attempt to complete the previous saved? Yes. Huh. But I promise you that's the first time I've ever seen that message. But literally what should pop up, and I can pretty much guarantee it'll pop up on your end. If it doesn't, certainly let me know. But it pops up the Atrix screen with the login, put the username and password in. Even if that would have popped up, I don't have a login to show you these screens, right? I don't have an Atrix account because I don't have an FEIN number, and it would show your information. You click next, and then it gives you the options of, hey, we'll send no later than the next day, right? And you have your options to when you want to e-file. I always recommend filing right away, the soonest option, right? But then once you do that, it'll ask you for credit card information. You type that in. There is an option where you don't have to have Atrix save that on file. So it would be something, it says, hey, do you want to remember this credit card information? With security these days, I've never heard anyone being hacked through Atrix or anything like that, right? I don't save my information out there, but you would have to type it in to make that payment. All right, so let's jump over to payroll. That was the end of AP. I know I've been peeking at questions. I didn't see any a few minutes ago. But if anyone is dropping off because they only were focused on AP, great. Have a great rest of your day, but I'm going to jump right into payroll because we have about 45 minutes left. But we have covered, we did cover the Atrix side of things. So it went to 1 hour 15, but we don't have to rehash the things for logging into Atrix, right? Setting up user accounts, what have you. Let me jump over here to payroll. So switching gears, I'm going to go to File, Open Company. And the reason why I'm doing that, earlier I mentioned as far as if you had Timberland Construction or your company's name, but then right here, if it said office salary, right? So you could have your field employees in Timberland Construction or your company's name, and then have a separate data folder for office salary. I've pointed that out to clients. They're like, oh, never thought of that idea, or no one told me you could, do that. Or they may say, well, we don't need to do that because our payroll person can see everything, right? So I'm not recommending it saying, hey, you should, right? That's completely up to the controller and, ownership of how they want to handle security. I'm just pointing out that it is an option and giving you a heads up that when we do process W-2s, it will say, hey, are you using one data folder or multiple data folders? So if you do have that scenario set up, my point is you would say multiple data folders. You would create 2 separate files, and then once you create those 2 separate files from the field employees versus the salary employees, then there's an option within Atrix where we literally click the merge button, and it would merge those 2 files together into one W2, W3, processing, because it's all under one, company, even though you do have 2 separate. I call these data folders. At one time, Sage did call these data folders, but then clients, I guess, were saying, well, what the heck is a data folder, right? Which you may be saying on this meeting. But it does say open company, but I look at these as data folders because a given data folder can have multiple companies within it. When I say multiple companies, the multiple prefixes over in general ledger. So let me click OK there. So once we do get into Atrix, that's where that'll be. Here, right, in payroll, you have the close month, right? But you also have the close year. So once you're in December, we're not closing the month for December, we're literally closing the year. I have had that question before, right? Because it was the employees or the users' first year using payroll and closing out the year in processes. So if you're in December, you're not closing December, you're doing a close year, which will get you in January 125. You can do if you are already in 2025 because you wanted to post that first payroll, right? Totally fine, right? Because you want to get that on your job cost reporting and maybe in your financial statements. When you do go to federal e-filing reporting, just like AP 1099s, you can run W-2s for your current year and prior year. So if you're already in 25, point is you would roll back to last year and you'd be good to go. There is, for year-end processing, what I recommend, if you do archiving of employees, right? There is a move, right? You can move checks current to current, move employees. We do have clients out there that on their list of data folders have a folder called, terminated employees, right? I recommend waiting for W-2s to be processed, right, and generated and processed, and confirming that everyone, received them, right, before handling your archive annual process, right? Because if we start archiving current to current, as you would imagine, and maybe saying, oh, yep, obviously, right, but not necessarily obviously, because there have been clients that have rushed to archiving, which, hey, kudos for wanting to archive, right? But we want to hold off on archive. I recommend holding off on archiving for your annual process until at least maybe a few weeks after you've done your W-2s. And when I say a few weeks, give or take a week, right? 2 to 4 weeks, we'll call it, right? Depending on how confident you are with the W-2s and the processing. So with that being said, you would be able to move checks, right? Current to current, meaning moving those checks for the given terminated, employee. And then you would want to move their master file as well to that. You can always move them back if they come back on board, right? I mean, if it's a layoff, typically we're not going to archive that person because maybe it was just a slow part of the season, right? And you want to keep them in your master file, because in the hope, I shouldn't say hopes, but the mindset that they may come back. But if someone's retired, unfortunately passed away, what have you, now we're talking truly archiving, right? So if there's any questions on archiving, certainly help with that. So as far as the W-2s go, we have under here tools, modify forms, W-2 forms. This is what Atrix is going to look at for your W W-2 forms. So if I come here, if I click list, plenty of clients just have the default, and that is what I would recommend. I have had clients that have 2025, 2024, 23, 22, 21, 20. I don't know if that was just like a, hey, that's how it always was done, right? Is there anything wrong with it? No, but really just need one form, whether it's called default, W-2, whatever it may be, and just on a year-to-year basis, focus on that, right? Rather than have a list to choose from. Again, does it hurt that if you have multiple ones? No. Is there anything wrong with it? Not necessarily wrong. I would just say keep it simple, right? Have one form, right? Have the employee minimum being a penny, and then you're just maintaining this default year to year. And when I say that, you know, if there was like health insurance, hey, last year, but hey, this year you don't, right? You would take that off, right? Or vice versa. There wasn't one last year, but now we're putting that in there. If I click over here in this field in box 14, such as a health insurance, right? Or a savings, or maybe here, medical, let's do medical insurance, right? We're clicking on that field. Now, depending on what the code is, right? Notice here when I try to type that, the reason why I want to click on that is you have to click text, and let's say S14 or whatever the code is. That would be talking with your, you know, your accountant, right? To see, hey, what codes do we need to put in here for the respective health insurance or medical insurance for the box 14. And as you can see for box 14, you have 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 6 available. Same idea over here on box 12A, right? If I come over here to deducts, if we have a, you know, 401k, or if we have a, you know, a Roth, right? And you need to put those in here. Again, for the text over here, it allows you to type it in. So if there's a DD, right, or whatever code it may be, you're coming in here and telling Sage to retrieve the totals for that given employee and bring those numbers into Atrix. So you're not manually typing into Atrix, you know, a report total by employee, right? Let Sage do the dirty work for you by modifying W-2 forms. And again, literally I've had clients when they were in Atrix, they started typing in numbers. I was like, oh no, we don't want to have to manually type that in. You'll want to come in and literally pointing that out to them, and they're like, oh, no one ever told me about this, right? Now, that's not typical, but it has happened, right? So I just want to point that out. Also for the box 12, right? 3, 4, 5 for box 12. If you say, hey, I have 6 or I have 7, how do I add a row? Well, we can add a row. We cannot add a row, right? Those are the boxes. But if you wanted to combine a 401k, or if you had a couple different types of 401ks that could go on the same line, again, talking with your accountant, we can come over here to formulas, and you can work with your consultant, whether it's myself or the consultant you work with on a day-to-day or month-to-month, and we can create public formulas. Public formulas is grayed out right now simply because in the sample data, we don't have any public formulas, but this right here, tools formulas, it doesn't say public formulas, but I'm telling you that these are your formulas, right? There is an actual public formula there, but the reason why it didn't pull up is because this is contract related, not payroll related. So here, if I click new, I'm just going to make something up real quick, but you could go here to employee deduct record, right? And start getting to, hey, if the deduct is this 401k, right? Or 401k match or whatever it may be. Point is, you write the formula with the respective deduct or fringe ID for that matter, depending on what you're pulling in here. You add those together, and then once you add those together as a formula, point is, you could utilize 2. You would click public formulas if we had one created. Sum up 2 deductions on one line, because you're limited to 5 here. All right, so I'm gonna leave that be. With all that being said, I'm gonna go check to see if that sparked any questions. I don't see anything. New vendors. The question area is so small. New. Let me try to expand this here. Oh, I must have missed this question. Bear with me here. Let me expand this question section here. That's what I wanted to do. Sorry, I use webinar twice a year. Test run, we answered that, right? Sorry, Nancy. Looks like you did 12 minutes ago. Is there a vendor report which will show all new vendors for 2024? New vendors. Will it show all new? Good question. I'll jump back to payroll, but I appreciate that question. Let me jump back over to AP. Sorry for missing it. Well, it was 12 minutes ago. It wasn't an hour ago, right? Yeah, there's not a default report. I'm already starting to think of, how to determine new vendors. I do know like a product called My Assistant. If you have that, that could notify you of new vendors as they come on board. Not saying it's required to have My Assistant, right, to get the information you want. We would have to look at the short answer is there's not a default report for that. Yeah, I don't even know what date we would look at for new vendors. I mean, we do have last invoice, right, in this given year, but that doesn't mean that that was the, first vendor. I'd have to put a little bit more thought to that. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is literally having a report say return vendors that they have transactions for this given year, but not in years prior. That's the only way I could think of doing that. So I am going to jump back to payroll here, and if you want follow up or talk with your consultant or even myself, we can look at trying to get that information for you. And also an idea real quick, and then I'll go back to payroll. Rather than looking at transactions, once you get your AP year into 2025, right? This year would be 2025. Last year, right, would be 2024. And then you have next year. Yeah, I think we'd have to get into transactions to get that answer. Because if you were in 2024, this year is 2024, right? Last year would be 2023. You could run a report to say, hey, show me all vendors that have a payment in 2024 or a 1099 amount paid in 24, but not in 2023, right? I mean, that could gear you closer towards new vendors, but doesn't rule out the vendors that may have just simply, hey, you worked with in the past, but don't work with anymore, right? So good question. That would be more of a custom report, but there's not a new a canned report. All right, so W-2s, we did the W-2 forms, right? That's going to pull in the respective information into Atrix. As far as setting up employees, notice here, this is grayed out, right? There is a way to, within, where's it at here? Where's that? Sorry. These check boxes right here, retirement plan. These check boxes will be checked on the Atrix side of things, right? If you have them checked or not. My point is, if you had a 401k, right? This one doesn't, or a union vacation, right? That we're looking at here. And if there was numbers for the given year, I have had clients think, okay, well, yeah, I had a union vacation, or I had a vacation, or I'm sorry, 401k, Sage doesn't automatically check this box for you. So can you check or deselect or check the box over an Atrix? Yes, but I would recommend having, again, Sage being the source of your data, so that every year you're not, checking those boxes or unchecking them there. So I would say to do the, the due diligence here. Let me click cancel and close. And let's jump over here to tasks, federal e-filing and reporting. Again, it doesn't say Atrix, but this is where you get to your W-2s here. There is state e-filing, and reporting up here, but for W-2 purposes, we have the federal e-filing reporting right here. You get a new report or saved report, you can always go reprint by going into saved report once the new report is processed and generated and filed with Atrix. Here, right, we should absolutely see 2024 W-2s, right? Here's the year, right? I'm gonna pick 2022, but again, if your payroll year is already in 2025 because you wanted to post payroll to get into job costs and general ledger, makes complete sense. All you would have to remember to do is flip it from 2025 down to 2024, so your data obviously matches your form there. But since sample data is in 2022, I'm going to click next here. Here's all the employees that have at least a penny, right, in 2022 data. I'm going to click next, generate. So this pretty quick on pulling this information in. But if you have 100 or 150, however many employees with multiple transactions, that step will take a little longer, right? So just need to be patient there. Again, just like I said for AP, right? Atrix is being interactive and saying, hey, your data is in 22, but it's a form 24 for this webinar. I'm going to click continue, but giving a heads up that if you see that, we need to get those in line with each other. I know Madeline asked about the test drive for 1099s earlier, if she's still on, and or for anyone for that matter, still on for the payroll side of things. You absolutely have a test drive here. I always mention this story. I'll try to make it quick. Is that back when I think it was 2012 when taxes went from or Social Security went from 4.2 to 6.2, or vice versa. The client that I was working with said, hey, first time using Atrix, is this going to go smoothly? I'm like, it certainly should, right? I said, yeah, I mean, Atrix is slick, it's very nice, it's interactive. And they said, great. Got on site, started to do the processing W-2s, and sure enough, one employee turned up red. That employee, the client wasn't happy. Hey, I thought you said this was going to go, smooth. Well, we had to do some digging to find out, hey, why did that employee show up red? And Atrix told us that the Social Security taxes were not within $1 of the required limit. Well, come to find out, is what they did is they closed the year, they got into the next year, right? We download, or not we, or told them, instructed them to download taxes, which we can talk about because I do want to point some things out there in addition to the W-2s. Downloaded taxes, so that when they downloaded taxes into that next year, it went from either back from 4.2 up to 6.2. And once they had the taxes in there to do the next, year's payroll, which went fine. Well, come to find out, after doing some investigative work, if you will, an employee said, hey, you left 4 hours off of my check from last year. So they literally went in and voided the check right, for last year and re-entered it and reprinted it because he walked in with the check and they shred that, right? Well, they entered the check or recorded the check and printed another one, but at that time they went back to the prior year, but they had already downloaded the taxes for the next year. So that's why that guy showed up, because in the prior year it needed to be within $1 of the 4.2% or 6.2, right? Either one. So ultimately the fix was closing out of Atrix, going into enter checks, and we had to record a negative, I think it was $8, like a -8 in the Social Security taxes. So it literally printed the guy an $8 check, and that got him within the dollar time or a dollar limit, right? So it was painful at the time, but with all that being said, the idea is that if we would have done a test drive, that would have popped up, right? Rather than when we were processing the W-2s and done the work, right? So scenarios like that. And I mean, kudos to, she wasn't happy that, it showed up red, but kudos to Atrix that Atrix was, hey, making sure you're within $1, right, of the Social Security limit or any taxes for that matter. With all that being said, we'll go to no thanks. Let's start processing W-2s. Here's our FEIN number. And then here, just like I was mentioning before, the multiple payroll data files. I mean, for this webinar, I'm going to use a single data for this company. But again, if you do have the office separated out, we'd want to click yes, use multiple data files. And then at the end of each, like I said, it would ask for the file name. And then we would merge them together so that in the grid of Atrix, just like we saw in the 1089s, you would see all of the employees consolidated together so that we do the one Atrix filing for the one company. I'm going to click next. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I think those are good. All right, back here, I'm going to throw in my contact name, consultant. All right, and then all right, so let's click next. We're filing for my company employer. Click next. Again, Atrix being interactive, saying, hey, your tax account number is incorrect or improperly formatted, right? I forget what we want there. I'm making one up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you type in your actual tax account number, right? That obviously will pass the respective test here. But here's the state withholding, our unemployment number that I just made up here for Oregon for Timberline Construction. But you would want to, Atrix would verify all those tax account numbers, so they can print them on the respective forms. Here, if I click next, what popped up here? Local tax items linked to state. Oh, yeah. Or Oregon has a statewide transit tax, right? I've been to Oregon once. It's been over a dozen years, right? But I don't know when that transit tax came out. I think it's last maybe a few years. Could be wrong there. At least from an Atrix perspective, that's when I recall it. But point is here, it's going to be interactive to say you worked in this state, what have you. We need that respective information for either the statewide transit that Oregon has. We as ETHOSystem work in the Midwest and the Southwest. I don't work with any Oregon clients. So whoever's on this call, if you were in either Indiana, Illinois, or in the Southwest, Arizona, as you know, Colorado, and anything that would apply to those respective states, Atrix would know about. All right, Oregon has no W-2 reporting requirements for that. Okay, so yeah, it's just, again, being interactive and saying, hey, there's no requirements there. That's why it's not gonna to show up there. So on that automatic update, Atrix is finding out all that information and has it built into the program. Do you have any employees who are exempt, right, from Medicare? I'm going to say no. Members of the clergy, no. Do you want to use control numbers? I wouldn't necessarily say I recommend control numbers, right? But it is that control number in the upper, corner to where if you wanted to print your employee ID, right, or sequential number, I would think you would want to print your employee, if you use control numbers, to maybe use the employee ID so it would stand out to you, right, as you're maybe flipping through, right, and searching for certain W-2s. It doesn't hurt by having it on there. So I would, when I say not necessarily recommend, I've always just clicked yes for clients as we were doing W-2s, just to have a control number on there to differentiate, especially if you have a, two John Smiths or anything like that, right? Obviously they'd have different social security numbers. But here, do we have any employees who elected to only receive W-2s, right? And as that says, elected to only receive W-2s, that means if you do click that, then that means they're literally only, as it says, getting an email. They're not also getting a printed copy. So here, if I say no, you do have that option to email it to them and print it, right? You may say, well, why would I want both? I'm not saying necessarily you would, but you do have that option to making sure, hey, if the email did get lost, right, they do have their paper copy sent to him or her, and have that. So here, I'm going to click 941. If you do have any third-party sick pay, right, these are the check boxes. Typically, the clients that I've worked with just need that 941 checked. But if there's any other that pertain to you, certainly you want to click those there. And I'm going to click next. Again, as far as the social security numbers, to each their own on the personal preference between asterisks and X's. I typically do X's. And then could you do no truncation, print it out? Yes. I don't necessarily know the security risk other than, hey, now if it does get lost, now you just put their social security number out in front of someone that intercepted it, right? So I mean, I would, for the sake of the matter, recommend truncating it, just to be better safe than sorry, right? Here, if I click next, now it's gathering all the information to pull into the grid. I did do this a couple weeks ago, and it did get an error for the Oregon one. So we'll just give a heads up that we will see that here shortly. And I'll explain what that means here. But here, the first thing it's doing is verifying the employee information. We can maximize it, just like I said on the 1099. If I expand that, right, you can see more here on screen together. I've had clients, well, one in particular, they're like, hey, how do I print this to Excel? You can't. You cannot. And that was another thing. I called Atrix and said, hey, can we? And they literally said it kindly, right? They weren't being rude about it, but essentially said, hey, we just pulled this information in. We're not generating this so you can go take this and go put it into a different other program, right? So point is, just in case you guys were wondering if you were thinking that without asking it, right? We're in this grid and we're living in here. There is no edit, right? Print to Excel or export to Excel or anything like that. Here I'll click next. Additional employee information, just like I mentioned earlier, right? Here's your check boxes that you may look at here, and oh, there's Lori. Yeah, she has a retirement plan. Hey, this person, hey, they don't, or this person does, right? Can you do this in here in Atrix? Yes. If you do that in Atrix, would I be, bothered by that? No, right? But I would recommend, rather than doing that every year, right, and saying, oh, this is that, right? I would highly recommend going into your setup and employees and check that box there. So then you can be consistent on a year-to-year basis, right? And have the employee data over in Sage match up to, what you're filing. Because, if you have the big number of employees, right, year to year, that would be painful to keep having to do that. And checking these boxes again does not write back to Sage employee setup. So here I'll click next. And now we're on the verifying the federal information. I'm going to drag this through or back over here, right? And this was the step where when we click next for that scenario I said, it literally pulled up out of their 100 employees at one row, and where was it at? Social Security wages, right? It literally said, hey, this is not within $1 of the limit. So point is, even at that step right there, it did click next. We clicked next and it went through just fine. But just giving you a heads up that Atrix is watching, right? That, hey, these do match up with limits and, what's taxable, what's subject to, and what the amount's calculated at. So it does do error checking is my point. Here's the Oregon wages, Oregon tax. Here, notice this, right? When I talked about, I'm not closing that out. We're going to stay there. But again, the modify forms, W-2 forms, right? Like we looked at earlier, just to rehash this real quick, right? I put in code S14, MED. There's code D for the 401k. If I close this, just pointing out by doing that there, let's expand this over here. Here's that S14, right? I pulled in those amounts for that given deduction. I pulled in, I think it was the medical insurance, I believe. But then here's the 401k, right? With the box 12D, right? Pulled in these the amounts from Sage. But earlier I gave that example of a client that when I was literally on site with them, and they said, oh, let me pull this report over from Sage, and they started typing in these numbers. I was like, oh no, we don't need to do that. We just need to go into modify forms and tell Atrix what deductions to pull in. So anyways, that will come from Sage if we update it and modify forms. All right, so this is the error that I was talking about. This literally Oregon state tax or the transit tax. There's no data to back these up, right? But there, Atrix is essentially saying, hey, the transit tax out in Oregon requires at least $1. That's what I came to find out. I didn't do too much research because I don't work in the state of Oregon, nor do we have any clients in Oregon, right? But rather than have all of you guys and gals, watch me type $1 for each one of these employees, right? I'm just going to do that for the first handful. I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to remove row. Again, I know I'm showing you things that I'm not recommending, right? I'm literally just doing that to save time of clicking $1, just purely from a webinar standpoint, right? I think it needs to. I think that was the requirement. So even though this is a little painful to do and fight through for the webinar, the optimistic side of it is that Atrix is well in tune with limits for taxes, any rates, any almost done here, but that's why I removed all the other employees just to get past this, because we wouldn't want to do that for 100, however many employees, right? I think I just missed one more here. All right, important notice is your final opportunity, right, to double check any numbers. Obviously, we went through that pretty quick and just, removed employees. We wouldn't want to do that, but we're agreeing that, hey, everything that we just looked at, quality assurance, everything looked good, whether it's addresses, names, what have you. Let's go here back to the complete W-2 service. You do have the option of the EW-2s, like I said, and having print and mailing employee copies. But again, if you want to physically hand these W-2s to your employees, like, hey, I want to get them today. I don't want to have Atrix send them tomorrow and have them get them 2 days from now, or right. I want to go here. You can absolutely do your print W-2s, but then utilize the the e-filing service within Atrix. But for the sake of the webinar, I'm going to go to the complete W-2. Like I said, more and more people are just jumping to that complete W-2. Especially, I remember when this first came out a dozen years ago, working with the client, and she was animate that she was printing the employee W-2s, right? And I'm not kidding you, the following years, or following year, right? She's like, yeah, well, I don't know why I was, in so many words, I don't know why I was so animate about printing them. Why wouldn't I do this? And she was the first one that said it's a no-brainer now. But so she went from one end of the spectrum to the other. Again, it's not up to me to decide. It's completely user preference. I wouldn't judge you either way, but if it was me, I would go that route. All right, let's click next. This, again, don't know of anyone that prints, saves a PDF archive for 30, where is it at? $34.95, right? Again, you could through these next steps, I know I've been saying print to paper for your copy, but you could print to PDF, right? And just save your own PDF. I've never seen a benefit of doing this. Here, this is that when we talked about control numbers earlier, right? It defaults to the employee ID as the control numbers, or you could do a sequential number, but sequential number doesn't mean anything to certain employees. So to me, employee ID would be the way to go if you're going to print control numbers. Again, here you just click print, right? Whether you like I said, print to PDF or print to paper. Think of that as your cover page for your employee copies. Here, 2 pages, right? Here's where are they at here? Lori, Terry, right? Four up to a page, right? We have the employer W-2. So you would print final, print to your paper, or PDF, right? For your copy, that's your employer copy. Like I said, if it's just your copy, do you need the 4-part perforated? No, because you're not handing these out. That's just for your copy. So I don't see why you would need to purchase, a 4-part just for your, own copy if you went the complete route, because Atrix would be, printing them. So now we just have a few more minutes left, so I'm going to just kind of roll through these. But here's your federal W-2, right? The two up here, right, for the employees. Again, print copy for your records. Would you like to print now? No, because I don't have a printer hooked up. But as you see up top here, here's your 941, your W-3, print copy. And then here's the state copy. Again, Atrix will file this for you. There's your check marks for retirement plan with the respective amounts, your tax ID. Again, print copy, have a state copy on hand. And then for your respective state, as you can see here, here's a Oregon WR report, right? I'm just going to throw in some, oops, is there a question? Some of the question popped up here. Oh, there it goes. I got the cursor back. So I'm just filling this in here. As far as the form, I'm going to say, do we have offer? Yep. Say yes here. But as you can see here, it's showing up red for the fields that are required for you to print or populate. We would print copy, and I'm going to say agree to those numbers that I just put in there. Let's see, just in the like we on the 1099. Let's see where this pops up. Yeah, this is what I was expecting earlier. Like I said, when I saw that message earlier, that's the first time I ever seen that. I don't know if it's I click cancel or something, but this is what you would expect to see. Username Atrix login, not your Sage login, your Atrix login. Password, it would pop up, show your name that they have on file. You would confirm that. You'd put your credit card information in, and send the filings, and then it would say, hey, you're going to get an email with an AFID meaning the Atrix filing ID, right? So that you could track it, and they would give you either email and or text alerts to let you know that things are good. If something did come back as rejected, right, what you would do is open up the saved report going into Atrix, and then we could do a corrected W-2, because that does happen, not often, but there is that option of doing corrected W-2s that your consultant or myself could help you out with if you need help. So I'm going to close that. It's 9:59 here, or 11:59 on our server. It was 9:59. I'm going to say, hey, not enrolled, right? It's saying, hey, why did you cancel out of that, right? There wasn't an option to click because I'm hosting a webinar. Otherwise, I'd click that. One quick point I left out for, I know we talked about taxes, doing the download taxes, right? When you do tools download taxes and we, update taxes for the next year, clicking start. I had already done this 2 weeks ago. Would it hurt if I click start again? No, but I'm going to click cancel and just show that you do want to come over here to taxes, tax rates. If I go to federal withholding, I know federal withholding changed in 2025. So that's a telltale right there that your downloaded, taxes went through successful. But there's your January 1, 2025. But then it seems like every year, a few clients, right, you have to make sure you go into your, and I'm going to do Illinois because I'm living in Illinois here, any unemployment insurance, right? So if I go to Illinois State Unemployment Insurance, now there is nothing in here, but as rates change, right, we need to, and the limit, right, whatever it may be. But my point is Sage, when you do the download taxes, Sage does not update your unemployment insurance for your given company. So remember, download taxes going into the next year, right? When you do download taxes, check that box, but then you want to come in here to taxes, tax rates, and update your percent, because that, as you all know, changes every year. So, all right, I'm going to go peek at questions real quick if there is any. I think it may be done here. So I appreciate everyone's joining. Hopefully that was helpful, and any and all feedback would good or bad, right, will be helpful moving forward. Thank you very much.